What up, Doe? This is the Roar of the Lions UK podcast, the podcast where six random guys from around the British Isles come together to talk about anything and everything Detroit Lions. My name is Anthony Fitzpatrick, and I am joined this week by Ryan McCluskey, which can only mean one thing. It's time for another episode of college football. This is episode 4. Can't believe we're already there. It seems only like a minute since we did the first one. Ryan, how are we doing this week?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, like I say, it's been an interesting week. Things are starting to take shape already. Like I say, for some teams, they've played 3 games. They're already a quarter way through the season, and we're starting to learn a few things and who's going to be up there and who's going to be down there. So there's some very interesting scores this week.
Yeah, obviously we mentioned last week we had a bumper week last week. There were so many big fixtures last week that lived up to the hype, and we had so much to talk through. But then there was this weekend coming up, and there weren't many ranked versus ranked fixtures. There were a lot of FBS versus FCF, and we kind of wondered, are they going to be able to keep up the intensity? Will there be a lot of close games, some scrappy underdogs, or are we going to be talking this week about a hell of a lot of blowouts? But as it turns out, couldn't have been a lot further from the truth. We had one absolutely massive upset near the top, which we're gonna talk about all these, but we had one huge upset. We had a couple more noticeable upsets a bit further down the rankings, and we did have a lot of plucky underdogs who nearly pulled out some really famous wins. So there's a lot for us to go through this week. So like I say, this is our 4th episode already. Can't believe we've already got this far. We are going to be looking today. We're going to be reviewing week 2 of the season. Obviously, as Ryan said, it's week 3 for some, their 3rd game. So we're starting to get a little bit of a picture about some teams now, and we're going to focus in on that. We're going to start with a little bit of news, which is Pac-12 heavy, which Ryan is going to love because that is his division. Then we're going to have a look at the injuries. Unfortunately, there's been a few more injuries this week, which do affect the draft and do affect a lot of teams in the NCAA. And then we're going to take a little look at next week's fixtures because there are a lot of good ones amongst some of the ranked teams coming up. So there's going to be a lot to look forward to. And then we're going to take a little look at head coaches, specifically head coaches who are very close to losing their jobs. Ryan has done this segment up for us because this is, as I say, there's only week 2 of the proper season. And we've already lost our 2nd head coach. Another team has already pulled the plug on a guy, and that is a very good way to segue into the news here. So, yeah, we'll crack on with it. So, yeah, as I say, we're 2 weeks into the season, and we've already had our 2nd head coach firing, and that is Clay Helton of USC, who play in the Pac-12. He's been given his marching orders just 1 week removed after USC routed the Mountain West Conference champions San Jose State, and this came in the wake of a 42-28 defeat against Stanford. Now, under Clay Helton, the Trojans, they were 46-24 under him, which sounds like a pretty good record, all things told, but the record in the last few years hasn't been great. They've only been 19-14 since they had back-to-back winning seasons in 2016 and 17, and they have not won a bowl game since they played in the Rose Bowl in 2016. So it's been a little period of drought for them in terms of doing well. And as we're going to talk about later, there are Pac-12 teams going in the opposite direction, finding a lot of success, and that seems to have been the catalyst for this. Ryan, obviously this affects the Pac-12 quite heavily. USC were, with under Keaton Slovis, they're a good side. They were expected to do well this year. What do you make of this firing? Was this something you saw coming, or is it a bit of a surprise?
I think I was surprised by the timing. I understand, the Stanford loss was terrible. I read somewhere that their rushing numbers were huge. They gashed them on the ground through the air. Stanford, don't get me wrong, they're not a good team. For a few years, they have been really struggling since a lot of their talent left. And Keaton Slovis was supposed to go in there, handle business, chalk up their first Pac-12 win, which, would have helped elevate them towards the top of the conference. But they were beaten in every phase of the game. They were outcoached and outplayed, and it was just messy, like you say, almost a 3-score loss. So I can understand it from that point of view. Like say, it's the bowl games, like in the regular season, like they were getting scrappy wins. But for a team of like one of the biggest teams in football to go 5 years and not win a mini championship, losing in bowl games, like that is something that will weigh very heavily on your CV. And I think they've taken a very bold decision to pull the plug just so soon into the season. It's going to be interesting to see what they do, if they have an internal hire, go for temporary, or if they, like I say, will look later at some candidates. But I think this is great news for, like I say, Arizona State, UCLA. They're going to benefit, be the biggest benefits from this because they're slowly ticking nicely. And Oregon, like this really shakes up a potential 3-4-way conference as a division. So I think it's very interesting. Let's see if it benefits, like I say, because they're going to have to hit the ground running and someone's going to have to step in on short notice just for a few days' time.
Yeah, exactly. And say, where one team falters, opportunity arises for others in the Pac-12. And that's going to bring us on sort of now. So in college, they have a top 25 power ranking system, which changes by the week. This is sort of judged on the strength of teams, the strength of their schedules, the games they win. I mean, I'm still trying to get to grips with how exactly it's worked out, but they're starting to take a little bit of a shape now. And the top 25 power rankings have been updated for this week. Now, at the top, Alabama and Georgia sit there at 1 and 2, probably rightly so, given what's gone on so far. But there's a few notable rankings that are up there this week, and we'll explain a little bit later as to why they're there. But in fourth, you have a Pac-12 team. You've got the Oregon Ducks, who are up there, which is incredibly high for them. And then just behind them in fifth place, you've got a Big Ten team, but it's not the Ohio State Buckeyes, which is usually the case. It is the Iowa Hawkeyes, who are right up to fifth. They've both gone up, I think, about double figures in terms of positions. They've moved up this week, and they're now both ahead of giants like Ohio State, Clemson, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, some of the big power schools in there that, and these teams, because of the results they've had, which we're going to discuss, have elevated them right up to the top of these power charts. And there is also an appearance in there at number 19 for Ryan's very own Arizona State Sun Devils. Now, you've mentioned this before, obviously the Pac-12 is sometimes a little bit of a disrespected division in terms of how people look at it on the outside, but Oregon are up there at 4. UCLA are in there, I believe, at 12 or 13 at this moment in time, and Arizona State are up there at 19. Is this now a time when people are going to have to start taking notice of the Pac-12 and the standard of football that it plays?
No. When we get to the end of the season, there may be one or two, but these teams won't be there. The Pac-12 is only there right now because a lot of teams are just struggling. Like some really good teams are slipping out, and the Pac-12 is just mopping up because the schedule so far from all the Pac-12 teams I've looked at have been fairly light. There's not actually been many conference games, so not many knocking each other off. Our Sun Devils have done the business, but we've beaten an FCS team and a not good FBS. But like I say, we've beaten them comprehensively. It's more relative, like getting AP points is more usually, it's how you win, not who you beat. If you handle your business by like 25, 30 points, it usually looks very favourably. So some of these teams, including my own, are probably too high. But right now, I think because it's such a wide open conference, people are watching it because there's quite a lot to talk about for a change. No one expected UCLA to be this high. And like I say, Arizona State, we usually start well, but we've got a hard end to the schedule. So I'll be interested to see if we're able to maintain these positions in the top 20 to 30 teams in the country. But right now, it's nice to just be talked about until one of us balls it up.
So don't say I never tried to big the division up. I did my best there to get the representation in, but yeah, like I say, it's good to see the teams in there, and it's good to see this, especially with you, Oregon, UCLA, going to be a lot of big games there, and it's going to be interesting to see who does come out on top, because it looks a very close division, really, doesn't it? Probably the closest out of most of the divisions going at the moment.
Yeah, and like I say, we're one of the conferences where we're split into North and South. So you have two mini champions that go to a conference game. So we're there's like rivalries within rivalries, like say, because like it's two teams of six, or two divisions of six. Some teams are just a flat conference, and sometimes that feels like there's less to play for. I feel like at times. So this one has its own little, just like a microclimate around it. Like say, there's things going on. Like right now, the north looks terrible. Like the south is kind of like actually battling. Like say, you got UCLA. Like you say, you've got Utah. Like you say, like they're there. Like you say, you got Arizona State. Like I've always said, like you always get Oregon that get talked about. Like you say, the Pac-12 South is actually, I think, where the most competition is.
Yeah, definitely. As I say, going to be really interesting to see what happens there. But we will return to the Pac-12 soon enough because a lot of them are in discussion this week. So yeah, that's sort of pretty much the news we've got there. So we're going to move over into the injury corner now. Just have a look at what's gone off to some of the players this week. So there are a few who have gone down injured, and this has been a very bad week to be a quarterback. There are quite a few of those who've gone down with injuries, starting off with probably the most significant in terms of draft stock. This is Boston College, their quarterback, Phil Jurkovic. He went off with a right hand injury on the first offensive drive during his team's 45-28 win over UMass. It's been reported since that he's had surgery on this injury and is likely to miss the remainder of the season. What this is going to do for his draft prospect remains to be seen. I mean, I had a little look around today, and there are a lot of people who think incredibly high of him, to the point where if he had a really good season, they might be talking about him going in the first round. But there were also a lot of people who weren't so high on him. So I don't know really what's going to go on here, but he was part of this middling group of quarterbacks who had the potential to break out and give teams another option in the draft coming up. Whether he's going to give it a shot without playing this year or whether he's going to stay and try and do another year in college remains to be seen. Another big injury in terms of the college championships at the end of the year. Texas A&M quarterback Haynes King suffered a broken right ankle in his team's 10-7 win against Colorado. He's had surgery as well, and he's expected to be out of action until about mid-October. Now, this is a really big injury for this team because they are expecting, to be competing to reach the playoffs this season, and to lose their starting quarterback is a big blow at this time. I don't think the schedule is the hardest coming forward, but they want to avoid any slip-ups along the way, and they'll want the team at full strength. Is their backup there, Zach Calzada? He's going to be under center in the meanwhile. He threw for 18 of 38 for 183 yards and a touchdown in relief during the game. So they just got the job done against Colorado. A lot closer than it should have been. So it's going to be interesting to see how they are going forward. And then finishing off the QBs, Kansas State quarterback Skylar Thompson collapsed on the field with a right knee injury in his team's game against Southern Illinois. He had to be helped to the locker room, and there were fears that it was a really bad knee injury. However, it's since been said that they are optimistic that he may get to play again this season, perhaps sometime in late October. But the Kansas State Wildcats, they were another team who were 2-0. They've had a really good start, really high prospects there. They're now going to be relying on their backup for the near future. Their backup there is Will Howard, and next week they're playing against Carson Strong of the Nevada Wolfpack, which is not an easy game in the slightest. I'll just take a little break in between those there. Ryan, these quarterbacks, there's some bad injuries at some really unfortunate times for some of these teams here, aren't they? Given that a lot of them have had really good starts this year.
Yeah, unfortunately, all these injuries for me end their team's chances. Like A&M now, they can't. I saw like what Zach Calzado did. They can't rely on that pure metal defense. They'll keep them in games, but they're not going to be able to win them. I think this is it for their season now. They'll win it, but I think I can see a few losses. They won't be able to hang with teams, and I think unfortunately this could put an end to their possible playoff hopes. Boston College too as well. Their season's done. Whoever the backup is, then he ain't going to be half as good as Phil Jurkovic, and he definitely has to find a way to return next year. Like say whether he can redshirt or he can get another year eligibility, because he won't be drafted. This ends any chance I think of sneaking in the final rounds unless he wants to test it. But if I were him, I definitely wouldn't. I mean, he's had 2 fantastic years, but for me, it's probably not enough to go off feeling risking it. So if he can, I think he should try return next year. And Kansas State, I've watched them a few years. They love to cause a Big Ten upset. Like Skylar Thompson is actually a really good quarterback, and it's good to hear that it's not as worrying as it first thought. Like he was able to help to get off it, have a negative X-ray. If he can return some point later in the season, like I said, they may be able to scrape a bowl game, which would be great for them because he's someone I think that's coming towards the end of his collegiate career as well. And it'd be nice to see him take the field again. But no, all these are devastating. Like I said, all these teams are doing well. These are all winning teams. And like I say, you can't afford to be calling up back up so early on the season. Because like I say, there's some of them, a lot of them are just not experienced enough.
No, and as you've said, it's such a shame just because these teams, they had very bright prospects ahead of them this season, and now we're going to see what the backups can do. But you fear that all three of them are going to struggle in absence of their starting guys. But we remain to be seen, and hopefully all of them are well and recover very soon. Right, so I'll finish off this section now. So a few more noticeable injuries. Virginia Tech, they're going to be without their star tight end, James Mitchell, for the rest of the season. He suffered a knee injury in their win over Middle Tennessee on Saturday. He was a preseason All-ACC selection, and in 2020, he had 435 yards and 4 touchdowns, which was the most on the team. And again, Virginia Tech are another one who've had a really good start to this season. They knocked off UNC week 1, which was a massive win for them, and they won again at the weekend. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get on without one of their big offensive pieces there. North Carolina State, they've had a bit of a bad week on their defense. Obviously, that's where Aleem McNeil came from this year for the Lions. They've lost linebacker Peyton Wilson and safety Cyrus Fagan, who are both going to undergo surgery and miss the remainder of the season. Wilson led the team in tackles last year, and Fagan had started off really well this year, made a couple of very impressive performances, and they're going to miss those. And then we end with Oregon. Obviously, they're already missing Kayvon Thibodeau, and they've also lost linebacker Justin Flo. Now, he was a superstar recruit, a 5-star guy, and he opened the game, first game of the season against Fresno State. He had 14 tackles in that game. Just came out and was an absolute monster game. And he also missed the game at the weekend against Ohio State. And that's another big loss for them. He's out for several weeks with a foot injury, possibly a bit more. And with Kayvon Thibodeau been out and still on a week-to-week designation, that is a blow for them, given they're 4th in the power rankings. They're doing well. They don't want to be losing any more critical parts of that defense. And they've also lost tight end Cam McCormick for the season with a right leg injury. So a lot to digest this week, but the quarterbacks are vital, but some of these other guys who are out as well, Ryan, they're also really big for some of these teams.
Yeah, like I said, the Justin Flo injury. I feel sorry for that man because I'm pretty sure he had a season injury last year as well. So he's 2 years in. Like I say, he's one of the highest 5-star recruits in school history and ratings history. The guy got like 0 point loads of 9s. Like he was fantastic. I think in week 1, I think he had like 14 tackles, like a forced fumble and a tackle for loss. So that's the production you're losing, like just in one game. I don't think they'll sit him again this year. I think if it is bad, like you say, they'll probably sit him now. Like I say, it's bad because, like I say, he's a redshirt freshman. So he's used his 1 year of extra ability. Like he was starting again this year. He's now lost this year too. So he's already a year behind in his development. Like I say, Kayvon Thibodeau, like he is, like I say, day to day, week to week. In the end, I think injuries are going to take their toll. They might not feel them right now, but these two, like I say, will come back to bite them close to the end of the year. Virginia Tech, like I say, losing a key weapon. 400 yards don't sound a lot, but how tight ends are used in college, 400, 500 yards is very serviceable. Like I say, he's a good blocker, like I say, in the run game. And right now, they're the second best team for me in the ACC. So losing a big contributor, someone's going to have to step up if they're going to keep that momentum. I think they'll do okay. I think it's a position you usually have depth at where you can work around. Like I say, NC State, you lose to safety and a linebacker. That's the core. That's the spine of your team. Like that is bad. Like I say, they were supposed to do pretty well, and they really struggled, and both of them left the field. They didn't manage to keep up many points, and it was they lost by a fair few scores, I believe. So they felt that pain already in that game. So it's got uphill battle from now on out.
Yeah, not a good week for some teams in regard to interest. But thankfully, that is it. We are done for this week. And especially you said with the Justin Flo one, that was big, but that just makes, without him and Kayvon Thibodeau, that makes the result they pulled off this weekend all the more incredible, to be fair. So with that, we are now going to move on to our week 2 review. Now, I know you did a winners and losers list for us last week, Ryan. Do you have one this week as well?
I've not got a list, but I know who a few of them are. Like saying, we can start with these winners.
Right. Okay. So yeah, we'll start with the winners of the week. Who have you got?
Well, like I say, we're going to start with, like I say, first with Oregon. They were let down, like you say. They were reinforcements that were missing on the defense, but they managed to somehow get the job done. There was a lot of help, I'd say, from the offense, from the Ohio State side, because they made some key errors, like you say, and in the end, they just fell too far behind. They left it too late in the game, and this turned into what I'd say was a huge upset. I'm pretty sure that snaps a very, very long run of Ryan Day in the regular season. He had about a 20-30 winning game streak. That's now ended. So he's gonna be pissed about that. So they're probably the biggest winners of the week. I've got a winner and a loser, like Michigan. I was like, say they did really well. Like I say, I was expecting the first loser of the week. Washington. I've got that. They were supposed to, in my opinion, I made a prediction that they'd bounce back. I felt they'd play angry, upset after the FCS upset. And I thought they'd come in and give Michigan a bit of trouble. And that would not be the case. Michigan beat them in every phase of the game, and they ran the ball right down their throat behind another strong game from Blake Corum. Another, I think, 100-plus yard game. And they look properly legit. Like I say, the Wolverines are doing something this year. Like, they silenced critics, I think, and they shut down a lot of momentum. So 2 winners, 2 losers. USC, they're my second loser of the week. They've lost ground in a very competitive title race and division, and their head coach has paid the price for it. I think this is going to set them back, I don't think they're going to be able to get a proper hire right now. No one is going to leave for them from a big post just 2.5 weeks into the year. I think they're going to have to bide their time and go with the offensive defensive coordinator. Teams are going to have a target on them now, going to come and attack them. And I think now they're going to have to try to save their season. They cannot afford another loss this weekend. So they're my winners and losers for this weekend, the high profile names.
Yeah, some really good points in there. So there's a lot of bad losers in there this week. I think a lot of teams really did suffer from some of these results that we went through. So we're going to dive a little bit more into some of these games now. So we'll hand out our awards for some of the games this week, and then we'll just go down into a general discussion about some of the games, what we watched, some of the better ones we saw, some of the bad ones. So yeah, we do these little awards beforehand. We do the beating of the week given to the team who obviously put the biggest beating down, and that this week belongs to the Oklahoma Sooners, who took WCU for 76 points to nothing. That was an absolute blowout of a victory, and Spencer Rattler wanting to quieten down any critics that they may have had from that narrow win over Tulane last week. I think in general, I think the Heisman winners some of the Heisman participants themselves put in big performances. Sam Howell did as well. We'll talk about him later, but it was a bit of a revenge tour for some of these guys who struggled first game of the season. But yeah, 76 to nothing. That's an absolutely huge victory there. The upset of the week, and the one that we're going to talk about probably in most detail just to start with soon, will be Oregon against Ohio State. Ryan's already mentioned it. That finished 35-28 to Oregon. Now, bearing in mind, this was in Ohio, at Ohio State's ground, and Oregon were 15.5. There were 15.5 point underdogs for this. So the betting was nearly favored by 16 points in Ohio State's favor. and they lost. It's an absolutely massive result for them and a really devastating one for Ohio State early on. So that's certainly the upset of the week. And then the statement win of the week. Now, I'm going to pass this one over to Ryan. It's only fair that I allow him to start with this one because he predicted this. He was very vocal in his prediction of this one. And it turns out that he was absolutely right on the money. Ryan, the statement win of the week.
Yep, the Cy-Hawk derby, the Iowa derby. I was impressed. I watched the whole game, and I'm just going to put it on record. Iowa have the best defense in the country by a mile. They forced Brock Purdy into 3 interceptions, and they held Breece Hall to just 69 yards. This is that's one of the most dynamic duos in the entire country, and they're both pretty highly thought of draft prospects. They sent pressure whenever they could. They blocked a few at the line, like say the safeties, because we know for a fact in the last few years, Iowa are producing NFL defensive backs and tight ends. They're probably really boosting their status now. The safeties were fantastic. They gave nothing over the middle, like they were cheating. They played them that game perfectly. And I predicted, Iowa would. I looked at their schedule. They are very much genuine playoff contenders. They can win this big division. I think they can make the championship game. I can see them winning it all. It's the offense. If Spencer Petras can keep the offense ticking over, but that defense will keep them in every single game. Matt Campbell, will be really upset because, Brock Purdy had a really bad day at the office. 3 interceptions. He was limited, to deep shots, rushing his passes because the offensive line, they had a rough day. And in the end, he left the game with an injury too. They couldn't even finish with him on the field. So I'm not sure what his status is for this weekend, but that could not have gone any worse. They were ranked about 8 or 9 in the country. Iowa were a few places below them. Iowa, actually, I think in the last few years have won most of the meetings, but this is the most high-profile meeting in history. Both ranked, both highly considered, and it was very simple in the end. Just they won the turnover battle. They leaned on the defense, which they do most weeks, and the offense just got it done. And I was really impressed with them. That from a neutral standing point, I think they should be one of people's favorite teams because they just play gritty football, and they're going to be a 10-11 team win this season. I would love for them to make a playoff run because they're just a team that's just been lifted up a few years. They've kind of just suddenly taken this next step up, and it was just a great watch. I really enjoyed it. It was an immense crowd. It packed out, and it was without that was a proper statement win.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched this game as well, and I was shocked because I seen Brock Purdy. I thought he'd been doing all right. I thought Iowa State Matt Campbell. He's always highly regarded as a coach. You think they're going to be ready for this, but they completely weren't. Now, to give a bit of context to this game, I think it was 9th versus 10th in the rankings. Iowa State were 9th. Iowa were 10th. They've now jumped to 4th, as I say, and they're the leading Big Ten team in the rankings currently. It finished 27-17. So as Ryan said, the stats for this, I'll just give them out. So Iowa State, their quarterbacks, Brock Purdy, he was 13 of 27, which is less than 50% on his passing completion, just 138 yards and 3 picks. And eventually he left the game. I didn't realize it was an injury. I thought they'd just pulled him, but he was replaced by Hunter Deckers, who came in and did a lot better. He threw 11 for 16, 114 yards and a touchdown. And on Iowa's side, Spencer Petras, he was 11 of 21 for 106 yards and 1 touchdown. Ryan's already mentioned Iowa State's running back, Breece Hall. He's a really good guy, but he was just 16 for 69, 1 touchdown. I think it's about 4 yards a carry, which isn't the worst in the world there, I guess. Iowa, Tyler Goodson, 21 for 55, 1 touchdown. And then in the receiving department for Iowa State, Darren Wilson led 2 for 56. And on Iowa's side, their top receiver was Charlie Jones, who only had 2 completions for 36 and a touchdown. Now, the thing that really stood out to me about this, do you want to know Iowa's offensive stats for this one, Rye? They had 106 passing yards and 91 rushing yards. they had less than 200 yards of offense in this game. And if you take the stats into consideration, they had one guy had minus 23 rushing yards. So they actually only ended with 68 positive rushing yards overall. So, I mean, that's like 180 yards in a game, and they won with 27 points, which proves that it's not necessarily sometimes the amount of time you have the ball, but it's what you do with it when you have it. Because how often do you win a game with less than 200 yards of offense so convincingly?
You don't. Like, say, look at Ohio State. CJ Stroud threw for like 450 yards, and they lost. Like, say, because of the field position. That's how Iowa won the game. The turnovers, they generated field position, which meant they had short fields to work with, and they managed to, like, say, punch in scores. Spencer Petras was asked to do very little, and that's why people have questions about the offense. But when you've got defenses that can put you in minimal positions where you could, where you can just do the bare minimum, that is the sign of an elite defense. They change games and they flip the field, and they give, like, say, they had such little time to work. And like, say, when Hunter Decker came in, Iowa State looked good. He was slinging it. Like, say, he had nearly a first down every completion. They just brought him in and said, look, you just have to throw it. And he was bombing passes. I was actually quite impressed by him. Like, say, but by then the damage was done. Like, say, they tired the defense out because they were just on the field far too often.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they rebound from this, because obviously this is a huge defeat for the season in one of their most high profile games. As you've already mentioned, it's a rivalry game, which just rubs it in even more. So it's going to be interesting to see how they recover from that one. But we'll leave that for now. Oh, sorry, just to give a shout out. So on Iowa's defensive side, their defensive back Matt Hankins, two of the picks, they were decent picks in fairness, and they gained a lot of momentum, for Iowa and the other one. So shout out to him. But we'll move on to the next big one now. Obviously, Oregon, Ohio State. We've already mentioned 16-point underdogs, nearly Oregon were. They went to Ohio and they came away with the victory without two of their biggest defensive prospects, which just makes it all the more unreal. I'll go through this here. There was some good stats up from Ohio State. So quarterback CJ Stroud, as has been mentioned, he threw 35 of 54, 484 yards, 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. On Oregon side, Anthony Brown was a lot quieter. He was 17 of 35, 236 yards, 2 touchdowns. In the running game, Ohio State did a bit better this week, because first week they really struggled. Mian Williams got 14 carries for 77 yards. Tre'Veyon Henderson got 12 for 54 and a touchdown. But on Oregon's side, this is where they really stood out. Their run game really hurt Ohio State, and this was the foundation of their win. And CJ Verdell, we've got to give him props. He was the player of the game by a long way in both facets of the game, actually. So he rushed 20 times for 161 yards and 2 touchdowns. Anthony Brown, the quarterback, he got 10 carries for 65 yards as well. And the other running back, I think it's Troy Dye, he rushed in for a touchdown and about 50 yards as well. In the receiving game, Ohio State, now their triumvirate of elite receivers they've got there all broke 100 yards. This is obviously their strength this year. Jackson Smith and Jigba, he's the one who not many people have heard of compared to the other two. He had a mega day. He got 7 for 145 and a pair of touchdowns. Chris Olave, he got 12 receptions for 126 yards. And Garrett Wilson, my guy on the players to watch list, he got 8 for 117 and a touchdown. And then on Oregon's side, it was CJ Verdell again, who ran the figures for them. He got 3 for 34 and a touchdown, although they had 10 other players who got into double figures for receiving yards. So they spread the ball all over the field, kept them guessing, didn't zero in on one guy. Their offense was really good. And the one thing I noticed about this, they scored 4 of their touchdowns down by the left pylon, down where Ohio State were. They kept running the same play. So 3 of them, I think it was both Fidel's touchdowns and Dye's touchdown, they would just hand off to the running back who was to the left of the quarterback, and he'd just run an elongated route outside in the post, unchallenged. Ohio State's defense was terrible this game, wasn't it? But you have to give props to Oregon's offense. They didn't have anywhere near as much of the yardage as what Ohio State did, but they just did a lot more with it.
Yeah, like you say, I'll start by saying, like, I'm going to give props to the young man CJ Stroud. Like, for his second start, like, he put on a phenomenal performance. Like you say, he was asked to do too much. You can't ask your freshman quarterback to throw the ball 54 times. Like, that's just not fair. Like, they tried to establish the run game and they gave up on it. And they put a lot of pressure on the young man's thing. Like, he threw an interception, he made some costly mistakes, but he did everything he could. Their offense did more than enough to win that game. The numbers you've just read out, that should win you every game in a season. But their defense was pathetic. Every single time, if you cannot seal the edge and set the run, they're going to run at you every time. And they picked on a few guys each time. And they just, like I say, they just mixed it up. Like I say, they had designed runs, they faked the handoff. If it didn't want Vidal dashing them, it was Antony Brown. Like, they could not pick up the reads. They didn't know who had the ball. And they just kept it really simple. Like, Ryan Day will be really upset because he got beat by simple inside zones, just single backs, I formation. And we're getting on CJ Vidal. Do not be surprised if this is the first running back drafted next year. This guy is probably now in the top 50 players. Like, he is shot up boards. He could pass Isaiah Spiller. He could pass Breece Hall mentioned. He is properly on radars now, and he is going to have a fantastic year. He's not the biggest, he's not the strongest, but he's compact, and he just sums up Oregon's day. They were efficient. They didn't put up huge numbers, but what they did do, they converted into touchdowns. And in the end, they hung on there, like say, about two key defensive leaders, and that's a proper statement win for the program. In the end, we'll see how much it means for their season. But like I say, this is something they're going to be able to now just ride the momentum with. Like I say, with the Iowa win, this is a big loss for Ohio State. Like, they're usually a shoo-in in a walk-in to like win this conference every year, but not this year. Like, not everything's going to go this year. Penn State, Wisconsin, Iowa, like, they're coming for them, and like I say, they're going to punish these losses. So this is a fascinating, but I'd love to see how this plays out, because like I say, they're going to have to rebound from this big.
Yeah, and you even look at both Michigan teams, which are unbeaten at the moment as well. There's a lot of teams who are going to see this performance and think, you know what, we don't need to be scared anymore. If we really get at that defense, they are vulnerable, even if they're putting up figures, like you say, that should win you every game, every day of the week. You should not be losing from that position. But just to put it into perspective, I think you've got to give props. CJ Vidal, I really liked his performance. He's so quick. I mean, to get to the outside and in by the pylon, it takes a lot of speed to beat defensive backs who obviously have a lot shorter route out there than he does. But it was whether it was on the outside, whether it was through the middle, his change of direction was just immaculate. And he just made so many defenders miss and went. And I didn't really know a great deal about him before, but I do now. And he's one that I'm really going to be keeping a close eye on because he looks such a good player. But I think you've got to give props to Oregon's offensive line as well. Ohio State didn't register a sack in this game. There were no interceptions. They kept Antony Brown and the running backs very well protected, which you can say it was 270 odd rushing yards and no sacks on the quarterback. You can't ask for more than that from your offensive line, can you? But I mean, Oregon, for me, I think they could go on and win quite a lot this year. I think that they're the team to beat for sure in the Pac-12, aren't they? Especially with a statement win like this behind them now.
Yeah, like I say, if anyone's going to make the even have a run at the player from the Pac-12, Oregon are the only team in consideration, because when strength of schedule is taken into consideration by the committee at the end of the year, you'll highlight this game and say they deserve to be there because of that win. And that was a statement win. And going back to, like, say, the MVPs, like, say, every offensive lineman can pat themselves on the back. They created huge holes. They kept Antony Brown upright, like I say, when he did need to pass. And they just dominated the day. And like you say, like, when you win in the trenches, usually you win football games, and that is testament to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's great for the program. You don't like to see the same teams win all the year. You like to see teams step up and take some of these big guns down, and that was certainly an example of that. So, all the props in the world to Oregon there. What other game? What other games really stood out for you this weekend? Apart from those.
Big props to BYU. They won the Holy War. They took down Utah. I think Utah had won like the last 8 or 9 out of the last 10 meetings. They had their number for a long time. But no, they've got a new quarterback that's come in for the likes of Zach Wilson. And they've got a good running back in Algier, I'd say. But they managed to get the job done. It was a close game. It was fine margins, but they stormed the field after. Like, that is a big statement program win. Like I say, it's always great to beat your rivals, especially when they've had your number for so many years. And like I say, they're 2-0 and nearly ranked. They've got a test on Sunday because Arizona State, we play BYU. It's a big game for both teams. It's going to be probably one of the teams' games to watch this weekend potentially. And I think they're going to be able to do something this year, potentially BYU. I thought they lost quite a lot of talent to the draft, but no, they've managed to reload, and they upset Charlie Brewer in his final year. So that was a good watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, BYU actually are ranked now. They're ranked 23rd. I know it's the first time in a while that they have been ranked. And you mentioned your game with them this coming week. We'll talk about that later. But I think it's the first time they're hosting ranked opposition since about 2009. So it's been a long time coming, and it's going to be incredibly interesting. This one is because BYU do look really impressive. You wondered how they do without Zach Wilson, but they seem to have adapted and moved on from him, which obviously you have to do in the college game. You're going to lose people every year, regardless, because the draft comes around, all the players go, you've got to reload. But, it was good to see them put a win up there. I know Utah are a really difficult side to beat. And that is that was under consideration for the statement win of the week as well, because BYU really did put down a marker there. Other games that sort of stood out there. I mean, did you watch the Notre Dame game? Because Notre Dame, they won 32-28 against Toledo, but they very nearly lost that. That would have been such a shock if they'd have fallen to them. Did you get a chance to watch that one at all?
I did, yeah. Notre Dame were terrible. They are the biggest pretenders in football. They should not be 2-0. They look awful. Toledo should have won the game, but poor clock management and decisions in the last 2-3 minutes. Like I say, they had chances, they left points on the board, they should have won. Like, Notre Dame can count their blessings. Like, no one is fooled by them and no one fears them either. Like, they just don't look very good. He's, like I say, I don't know what to make of them. Like I say, I feel sorry for teams, like I say, because arguably, let's say, they could be very easily 0-2, and no one would blame them if they were.
I think the big thing I've seen there is their offensive line has fell to bits. Obviously, they lost Liam Eichenberg, the left tackle, to the draft this summer. They lost Tommy Kramer. Obviously, we're familiar with him at the Lions. They lost a lot of pieces on there, and they've really not replaced them. I mean, I think they gave away, what was it? About 7, I think it was as many as 6 or 7 times their quarterback got sacked. That Jack Cohn, the quarterback there, 6 sacks. There was an interception. The running game, it was fairly efficient, but that's been their calling card over the years. That offensive line allowing that offense to flourish, and it's just not looked the same this year at all. But I mean, as bad as we can say they were, I was really impressed by Toledo. I came into that one thinking, they've really got no chance here. This isn't going to be much of a game. But I mean, their running back, Bryant Koback, he went for 122 yards and a touchdown. I mean, just in general, running backs had such a great week. There was so many big 100+ yard performances from running backs this week. But Koback, he looked good. I think it was Maddox, the wide receiver. He got, it was about 140 yards just on 9 receptions. they put some real good offense together. And as you say, it was the clock management which absolutely let them down. But that would have been an absolutely massive result had they been able to do a bit better and pull that one off. But Notre Dame are really going to struggle this year, I think, especially when they come up against the better teams. They're going to get figured out real quickly. But let's say it was good to see the underdog fighting again. So we will see there. Were there any other games you managed to get an eye on this week?
Yeah, my personally the biggest upset of the week, like say, Florida State losing to Jacksonville State. That was terrible. Lost on a Hail Mary, like say. I'm pretty sure Deion Sanders, I think, is the head coach of Jacksonville State. Like say, I think he's only been there like say a few months, but felt sorry for Mackenzie Milton, like because that is not how you want to come back. He didn't have a good day. The team had a worse day, and he's come off in one of the, like say, he's had to bear the brunt of one of the most embarrassing losses in program history. Like that was just terrible. Like there's no words to say. Like you say, they no one wants to talk about that, but that's quite hilarious. Their fall from grace of last few years has been meteoric.
It is. It is such a shame because you just want him to do well. You're sort of rooting for him there. But I mean, you know, Jacksonville State, they did look good. I mean, you highlighted their offense before the season started. It's a very high-powered offense, and you saw flashes of that in this one. It's probably the one team you wouldn't want it to happen against with Mackenzie Milton, but it was good to see him start. He did all right. I know he threw a pick, which wasn't the greatest in the world, but apart from that, I don't think there was a lot he really could have done about that performance. But again, it's good to see these smaller sides. Jacksonville State, that's a huge win for them, considering they had a really bad first week where they didn't score any points at all. Hardly. It was really disappointing first week because I watched them then as well on your recommendation actually, and they just did not show up. But you know, that's the power of the college football. One week they can be absolutely terrible. Next week they will they come back with a result that you're absolutely not expecting. I suppose while we're here, we'll move on to the Michigan teams a minute. I mean, both Michigan sides undefeated and both are really riding the crest of really strong running games. You mentioned obviously Blake Corum start with, so the Wolverines beat the Washington Huskies 31-10. But I mean, their two running backs, Blake Corum, he got 171 yards, 8 yards a carry and 3 touchdowns. Hassan Haskins, 155 yards, nearly 6 yards a carry and a touchdown. And then on Michigan State's side, Jordan Simmons, 16 carries, 121 yards, but he didn't get a touchdown. But Kenneth Walker, the guy who broke out big first week, got about 250 yards, 4 touchdowns. He got another this week, 57 yards, 1 touchdown as they defeated Youngstown 42-14. I've enjoyed watching. I did watch a bit of the Spartans game, and obviously I watched the Wolverines game because I was watching Ulofoshio, but they both look a lot better this year, didn't they? Because we didn't hang much hope on them when the season started.
Yeah, it's funny. I can't remember a year where they've both started so well. I couldn't even go like. I'd have to look through the record books. The last time they both started 2-0 because it's probably going to be a while. But do you know what? They've both gone back to basics, pounding, running the ball, killing the clock, which opens up the pass game. Like they've both been very solid through 2 weeks. Like say, Jim Harbaugh has been under pressure for a few years now. Like say, he always gets an 8 or 9 wins, but just could never get there. Like say, the seasons, like say, they've started with relatively nice starts this season. Like say, competition wise, it will get tougher, but they're capitalizing now where teams are letting themselves down, and they're building the foundations. Like say, their all lines are gelling, which is great to see. Like they're creating big holes, and like say, it's the fact they've got 2 running backs. They managed to keep them changing, keep them guessing. Because teams that get often like just run the ball one running back, they tend to get found out. Like say when they're rotating backs that are getting like different 100-yard games each. This is going to go a long way to establishing how well they're going to do this year, and they could both very well, like say, get 7, 8, 9 wins. Like this is big for Michigan, not just as a teams but as a state. Like because these two teams have struggled for a number of years now. Like say, and I think possibly in for sneaky good years between them. I can't wait to play each other. I'm hoping they're both maybe undefeated, or if
Or
they're
with
both riding the crest of a wave.
or within one win or something like that of one another. I know Michigan State, they've got we'll talk about their next one later, but they've got a real test of character next week, whereas the Wolverines schedule is a little easier. But I think looking at the two teams, for me, Michigan State look the more whole at the minute. I know the Wolverines fans, and I saw this all over my Twitter feed, they were angry at this one. I know they won, but they're all really high on Cade McNamara, the quarterback, and he threw just 7 times for 44 yards. It was only 15 passing attempts, but they were like, what was it, 55, 60 rushing attempts in there instead. I know they're absolutely not happy that they're just running the ball, but you've got to ride the crest of the wave, aren't you? If you're not stopping the run, you just carry on with the run, don't you?
Oh yeah, like I said, this isn't about getting Cade McNamara highlight reels, is it? It's about winning games, which is not done for a long time. If you say you ride the hot hand, they will give Blake Corum the ball 1,000 times this year. Like I say, if it's going to win them games, Cade McNamara will just be a handoff merchant. And there's no point complaining about it, because would you rather he does a CJ Stroud and you lose, but he throws for 450 yards? No, you wouldn't. Like you say, if he touches the ball minimum times and they get results out of it, then so be it. He can be a game manager. That's what you ask him to do. And in the end, like you say, if he's not happy, well, you can put in a transfer request, because Jim Harbaugh he does things his way. Like I say, there'll be no swaying to what the fans want.
No, he's very stubborn, really very stubborn in what he does. And I think that's why he gets a lot of the criticism he does there, his inability to change, especially when they've not had the most success, especially against OSU over the past few years. I know that's a real bane amongst a lot of Wolverines fans, but we'll take the good news for now. They're both undefeated. They're both doing well. We'll see how they move on going forward. Now, so we'll just close out with a couple of other ones that were a little bit surprising over the weekend, and then we'll take a look at our guys who we've been looking at, and then we'll look at next week's fixtures. But a couple of others that stood out, the Arkansas Razorbacks, they blew away the Texas Longhorns 40-21. Now, bearing in mind, I think Texas was 6-point favorites for that, and it was at their own ground as well, and they got absolutely blown away in the end. And they're moving divisions soon, where they're going to be the absolute fodder of where they're going. And if you can't beat an Arkansas team like this, who aren't the greatest, and we're slated to have a really bad year, then you've got problems. I think the future's not looking very bright for Texas, is it, Ryan?
This is a weird one. Like I say, they've got like 3 4-star quarterbacks. They've got one of the Heisman favorite non-quarterbacks in Bijan Robinson, and they just got walloped at home by an Arkansas that just lost their starting running back and quarterback to the draft and barely reloaded. Like that was embarrassing. Steve Sarkisian, this is a disaster for week 2. It got the benched Hudson Card already. Like it says 2 games in, and they're going with a Thompson, a new quarterback this week, and that is never good. If you're 2 games in your year and you already don't trust your quarterback, like that says a lot about where this program could go. Robinson was bottled up. Arkansas played the perfect game. Like they dominated all 3 phases. In the end, it was a few garbage time scores, I think, from Texas. They should have lost by far more. Like points were left on there, and they really need to look at themselves. Like I say, who let them in the SEC? Texas are fucking terrible. Like they are going to get smacked. They think they're going to be able to ride with the big boys. I don't think they'll even be able to compete with the likes of Ole Miss. They're not even going to be able to hang with small teams like that, or the lesser teams. They're going to regret moving to the SEC very quickly. And I think they're going to regret letting them in, because they're going to chalk up a lot of losses.
Yeah, it seems like a move entirely motivated by money rather than over competitiveness. I mean, just to put it in this way, the Arkansas quarterback, KJ Jefferson, threw for less than 140 yards in this one, didn't even register any touchdowns, and he got picked off once as well. They had 5 guys who rushed over 40 yards. The top one being Traylon Smith, who went for 75 yards and a touchdown, but they just ran the ball down Texas's throat, and they couldn't do anything with it. They didn't even need to resort to the passing game in the end, which is a big problem for one of my 5 to watch, who I'm going to talk about very soon. But fair play to them. They've got the hardest schedule in the country, Arkansas do. They're 2-0. They've got an FCS team coming up this weekend before all the big guns arrive, so they've got the potential to make waves early on. Was there anything else from any of the games you saw this week? This was the first time I'd seen Coastal Carolina and Grayson McCall this week. They don't look like they've missed a beat at all. That offense is just one of the most fun things to watch ever. They put up nearly 50 points on Kansas. That was fun to watch. Was there anyone else who stood out for you before we end this week's little section?
A game I watched, TCU. They're now ranked. They're not ranked, but they're 2-0. They had a great comeback. Like I say, Max Duggan, they've got one of the better rushing teams in the country. They could possibly put together quite a sneaky season in the Big 12. Like I say, they're a team to watch. Like they've got a lot of weapons, and they've got one of my players to watch as well. Got an up and down game, but no, that was a fun watch. That was two competitive teams who are going to cause some upset wins in both conferences.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of fun games to watch this week. I think, at the end of it, considering what could have been with a lot of the variations in quality and size and rankings between these sides, I still found plenty to watch, and it was really fun overall. So yeah, hopefully may long that continue. But we're gonna have to move it on now, and we're gonna have a little update on our guys who we've been watching. We've picked 5 guys each. We're just having a little look each week at how they're getting on. Did you get a chance to watch any of yours in the flesh I say in the flesh, on TV, or
Yeah, I managed to watch a few. Yeah, like I say, I managed to see Matt Corral again. He had another big week, and he's properly making a Heisman run candidate. I don't know if it's going to last, and it wasn't the biggest opposition. Like I say, he was super efficient. Took on Austin P, put up 54 points. He threw for 5 more touchdowns. Like I say, he had like a 60% completion range. Like he's already putting up some really big numbers. Like I say, he had another 35 yards on the ground. And it's weird. Like I say, I'm just waiting for the meltdown. I'm waiting for the game where he throws loads of interceptions. But so far, it's not coming yet. But like I say, they've got games coming up next week. They've got Tulane. They're no mugs, but Ole Miss right now starts 17 in the country. And then 2nd of October, Alabama. I can't wait to watch that because that smells like an upset. Because a few years ago, Ole Miss managed to cause an upset and beat Alabama when they weren't ranked. So let's see if they can do it again.
Oh, I tell you what, if Matt Corral can lead them to victory over Alabama, the hype is going to go through the roof for him, isn't it?
Yeah, even if he doesn't, you don't even need to. I don't think you even need to win. If he can hold his own, like even in a shootout, like and just protect the ball, that's all people want from him this year. They don't have to score lots of touchdowns. Just don't throw a lot of interceptions. He is solidifying his draft stock very well and through. Like I say, the tough games are coming now. Like I say, Arkansas, Alabama, and Tulane the next 3 weeks. Let's see just how clean he is, because right now he's just narrow-minded. He's got laser vision, like I say. So it's looking good.
And he's forged a very nice partnership with Drummond, the guy who you mentioned, wasn't he? I think they had he had about 160-yard week, was it? Dontario Drummond?
Yep, he had 160 yards. Like I say, my second player to watch. He leads all receivers in the country. He's got a near 90 perfect PFF score right now. I said at the start of the season, he will rely heavily because, like say, Elijah Mitchell, Kenny Yeboah left the draft. Corral would have to find someone to trust. It just happened to be Drummond. And like I say, it's not even like say he's just shooting it. Like he's got tidy route running. His hands are really good. Like he's just a crisp receiver, and he's got a good build, 6'3", but he's a bit lean. Like he's slowly having a nice year, and he just happens to be a senior. So he is going to be draft eligible this year, and he's having the perfect season. Like say, being a middle to late round kind of guy. So he's going to be someone that is just gaining more momentum and fans.
I'll tell you what, if we were to get him in a mid round, I think from what I've seen of him, I'd be absolutely delighted. He seems to be showing better than that. I mean, if he comes up and has a game against Alabama, surely you've got to push him up the rankings just a little bit, or has he got a ceiling?
I don't know his ceiling. Like I say, I think he had 7 touchdowns last year, so he's got hands. Like I say, he's in the red zone. So like I say, he might be able to climb to, like I say, maybe 2nd, 3rd round. But no, he's impressing me, and like I say, he's leading his quarterback to a Heisman race. Like I say, he's relying heavily on him so far. He's helping him.
Yeah, so I'll move on to a couple of my guys now then. So first up for me is Carson Strong. He's had another really good week. Everyone knows how high I am on Carson Strong. I put up a little clip of him earlier. Absolute dart he managed to throw right into the edge of the end zone, put it right in the receiver's hands. It was lovely to watch. He went 34 of 43, which is a 79% completion rating for 381 yards and 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. That was against the Idaho State Bengals. Now, they are an FCS team, but he had a flawless performance against them. And when you're playing an FCS team a lot less, then that's all you can really do. Go out there, put up big numbers, and show that they're not going to be a nuisance to you. And that's exactly what he did. And what also has been good with him is he's only been sacked once this year. His offensive line is keeping him healthy because obviously he's had problems with a knee injury, which he needs to let heal, but they're looking after him very well, and it's allowing him to play at his best. So it's really good to see him playing so well. He got Offensive Player of the Week last week. He's put up really good numbers this week, and he's starting to come to attention to a lot of people now. But for me, he's one I've firmly got my eye on. If Jared Goff struggles in Detroit this year, I'd love for us to draft him at some point, especially if he carries on as he is. This weekend coming up, they're going to be playing against the Kansas City Wildcats. Now, this is their last Power 5 opponent of the year. So I'm going to be looking for him to have a real big statement game here. If he can put up similar numbers against a team like this and a defense like the Wildcats have, then he's going to be exploding onto the scene. There's going to be a lot more people taking notice of him there. So hopefully we're going to see that there. They're 2-point favorites in that game. So hopefully they can bring the win home and solidify his draft stock even further. So in my views, his stock has gone up this week. Garrett Wilson, we already mentioned him earlier, 8 receptions, 117 yards and 1 touchdown against Oregon. He had a really good game against a tough defense. I know all the receivers fed, but there were a lot of good contested catches there. He got a lot of separation, especially on the touchdown, although this was actually kind of funny. The clip is out there somewhere, but the guy who was supposed to be marking him was looking at his wristbands. They have wristbands on where they've got all the instructions on what they do. And this guy didn't know the play had started. Garrett Wilson just run straight past him, straight into the end zone for a touchdown. And he's probably no doubt gone absolute rollicking for that this week, although 3 or 4 of them were guilty of such. It was really funny. Treylon Burks for Arkansas. Mentioned Arkansas earlier. Now, this is a real big problem for him. He got 5 receptions for 37 yards against Texas, but this is really worrying because they're not throwing the football. They're running every week. KJ Jefferson, the quarterback, has thrown for just 128 yards and 138 yards in his first 2 games. And just to put it into comparison, they've scored 9 touchdowns this year in their first 2 games. 8 of them are rushing touchdowns. Just 1 is a passing touchdown, and it's really hard for him to prove anything while they're not throwing to him. So hopefully that's going to change. They play Georgia Southern next, who are an FCS side. Really need to see something from him here, because after that, the next 3 games, Texas A&M, Georgia, and Ole Miss. That's an incredibly difficult and rough schedule. Obviously, it gives him a chance to ball out against some good teams, but the quarterback needs to start throwing it and trusting his receivers, which is really worrying. So his stock is going down with me at the minute because he can't prove otherwise. That's a few of my guys there. The rest of your guys, Rye, anyone stand out this week, or was there some that just weren't able to do much?
Yeah, they did pretty well. Going back to Burks, I don't understand, because last year with the pandemic, they changed the eligibility rules. You got a free transfer where you didn't have to sit out. So if this is his final year, why didn't he transfer to a new team that had a quarterback? Like, he wouldn't have had to sit out the year. So unfortunately, he's made a huge mistake staying at Arkansas. Like I say, he would have flourished somewhere, like I say, so his stock is going to plummet this year. Yep, Malik Wilkes finally got a test this week. Say he beat Campbell fighting Camels the week 1, but Troy Trojans, like they're a good school, and they were made to work for it. They only won by 1 score, but I was impressed because he got to show his dual threat ability. He had almost 100 yards on the ground and a touchdown at nearly 4.7 yards a carry. So whether it was design runs or split plays, he proved that he was able to safely handle the ball, and he got it done on the ground. He went through the air with a new passing touchdowns for roughly 150 yards. He's the kind of guy, like say, he's never going to do loads of one, but he can do both of them just quite as well. Like say, he's more than capable of, like say, tucking it and running when needs be. And that was a big win for them because they've got a bit of a hard stretch now. They've got ODU and then they've got a good Syracuse team. So he's going to be made to work for this draft stock this year, but he had a good game. Also, I mentioned TCU. They managed to sneak away, like say, would come from behind win. And the cornerback Trevius Hodges Tomlinson, he had a very up and down game, but in the end, he actually made some big plays. He came up with some very clutch pass breakups because they were moving the ball very well with Cal for a majority of the game. And he actually came and stood up at the end, like I say, and he made it count. Like I say, 6 tackles. He had a few pass breakups. And this guy, remember, he's only like 5'7". So he's someone that gets picked on a lot. And he was able to hold his own and see out the victory for the win. So I think they had a great year. And my final guy, Merlin Robertson, he once again was helping set the edge and was a brick wall for Arizona State as they managed to see off a nice, comfortable second win. He got a solid 7 tackles, so he was there stout in the middle, and he was doing pretty well. So he's someone that's stuck. He's quite nicely just sat there ticking over. Like I say, he's yet to play one of the big boys where he'll get noticed on the stage, but I'd say he's looking like a current middle round linebacker. So I think I had pretty much good weeks from everyone.
In Malik Willis's case, obviously, he looks so good. Is he at the point yet where if you're offered Rattler, Howell, or Willis, you take Willis over them two? Because I love the dual threat quarterback, and part of me would want to take that right now, but is he there for you yet, or does he need to do a bit more before we're talking in the same realms as Sam Howell or Spencer Rattler?
No, I'd say right now he's going in probably the middle to the second half of the first round. I think he's below Rattler, but above Howell, who's sliding. I think right now you'd want to take him like somewhere like between 10 and 20. He's yet to just crack that top 10 because it doesn't help, like you say, the level of competition. Sometimes you just disregard his film, which is just not fair because look at Trey Lance. No one did that with him, and he was playing the exact same teams and he was doing the exact same things, and people are writing off Willis in the exact same way. So let's say when he gets, like, say if he puts up a big game against Syracuse, people are going to wake up and they're going to take a bit of notice.
Mind you saying that, they lost to Rutgers this week, didn't they? They don't look the best team either this year, I guess, to put on tape, but we'll see. He certainly looks an exciting prospect anyhow. I'm going to finish my 5 off so we can take a quick look at next week. So my other guys, Christian Harris, linebacker at Alabama, they were playing Mercer this week, or FCS opposition, and they blew them out, but he stayed busy. 4 solo tackles, 4 assisted tackles, 1 tackle for loss, so stayed busy, but you can't really take too much from that one. Next up, they're playing the Florida Gators, and that's going to be a lot bigger competition. Maybe not enough to threaten an upset against them, but they're ranked 11th at the minute, and they hold a rushing attack which has rushed for 763 yards in 2 games. That's not a typo or a lie. They have 763 yards of rushing offense in the first 2 games this year. Now, it was only against Florida Atlantic and Southern Florida, not the biggest teams in the world, but still, that's a lot of yards. So their run defense is really going to be put to the test. So him as a linebacker, he's going to be right in there trying to plug that up. So we'll see what happens there. And my last guy, Edafwan Ulafosio. If you watch the Michigan game this week, a lot of you will have got to see him maybe for the first time properly. He's a tackling machine, as Jim Harbaugh called him, but he had a really good game. He got 4 solo tackles, 9 assisted tackles, and a tackle for loss playing against Michigan. And, they're just sort of let down by their offense in Washington. It's absolutely terrible. and the defense really, it just gets gassed after a while. It's not their fault really what they can do there. But to start with, he was all over. You heard his name mentioned nearly every play. He helped buckle up the run game early on. He made a really great goal line stop on a a fourth and goal at the
I
1
jumped
yard
like
line.
Superman,
Yeah,
didn't
he
I?
did.
Yeah.
I think it was Coram. He dived over the top of the scrummage, and
He
Ulafosio was on the other
smacked
side,
him.
did the same, hit him so hard, and he got nowhere near it. It was a wonderful goal line stop, and I was just like, yes, get to see a big play like that is made. He had a really good game, in fairness. Like I say, they just got tired, and eventually the run game just got forced down their throat, and they weren't able to deal with it. Obviously, his team's had a rotten, nightmare, horrible start. Really, really, really bad, but he himself is playing well, which is good. And they play Arkansas State next, and they're 17-point favorites for that. So, hopefully their fortunes can improve and he can have another good game. That's all the prospects for this week, how they've played. So we'll take a little look at next week and then move on to the head coaches, and then we'll finish for the week. So next week, we've got a lot of good ranked fixtures this week. Obviously, Ryan, I'll start with yours. You're playing BYU, 19th versus 23rd. You're at BYU. It's going to be a tough one. How do you see this one going? I think you opened up as 2-point favorites, so it's really close. They've come off a big win. And if BYU win this one, it'll be the first time since about 1952 that they've gone 3-0 in a season. There's a lot on the line for them.
Yeah, this is a big game. Like I say, like we can't afford to lose this game because it's going to weigh heavily, like I say, on the schedule. Like this is our first real test. Right now, we've been untested. Like I say, we've had 2 very comfortable wins, and now we've got the BYU team that's riding the crest of a wave. Like I say, they've upset Utah. Like I say, they're close to probably jumping in like maybe 15th, 50 goals 3-0, like one of the best starts in program history. So we are on the back foot. I wouldn't even give 2-point favourites. I'd probably say this is like equal. We just saw Jaden Daniels, our quarterback, have his best ever career rushing game. Like there wasn't much going through the air, but he took it and ran. Like I think he's going to have one of the best games of his career to like take down them. I think it's going to be really close. I think if I read like somewhere, Arizona State right now, I think we have the best turnover margin in like the last 3 years. When we have like plus 33, like we're one of the best teams for like taking the ball away, and that's going to be key because they've got high-powered offense. They found Pa'au, a wide receiver. They've got Algier, the running back. We're going to have to take that ball away. If we don't take the ball away and we don't win the turnover margin, then it's going to potentially be a shootout. And that's one thing I don't really want. So this is going to be something that's going to be settled by, I'd say, 2 or 3 points. Yeah, it's going to come down to maybe a kicker. It's going to be one of the games to watch for the weekend.
Absolutely. Heart of Hearts, can they win it? Do you see an upset? What are you thinking? Or do you just don't know?
I wouldn't be surprised if BYU won. Like I say, I wouldn't say it's an upset either way. I think this is generally one of those games where either team could win. If we win, that will make me feel really confident about a potential championship in Pac-12 win in the South. If we lose it, I'm going to very much question about our title credentials.
Could it be down to something as simple as home advantage? If this was flipped and you were at home, would you be a lot more confident that you could beat them?
Yeah. Not a lot of teams come to Tempe, come to Arizona because of the heat, the weather, a lot of games at night, like, and student section, the crowd, like our home games were fantastic at home. Like say, playing at their place in Utah, different altitude, because I'm sure it's going to be a lot higher above sea level. They've got home advantage.
Yeah, obviously we'll see, but best of luck to them. I hope they do well. We want at least one of our teams doing well this year. I don't know how the Lions are going to do, so we wish them all the best. So looking at other fixtures this week, the one that stands out for me, and obviously maybe because it's got a Michigan influence to it, Michigan State. We mentioned the Wolverines have got an easy one this weekend. I think they're playing Northern Illinois, who are FCS, I believe, if I'm right in saying. But MSU are traveling down to Miami, Florida, to take on the 24th ranked, side there. How are they going to fare against De'Aaron King and Miami? Can they pull off an upset? Because especially as it's away from home, this is going to be a really tough game and a real test of their credentials. If they can go there and win, and from what I've seen, if they can establish their run game as they have, and Miami haven't looked the most impressive in the world, I think the upset's absolutely on the cards here, possibly. Do you reckon they can as well, Rye, or is it just going to be too much of a step up in opposition for them?
Oh no, they can definitely win. Like say another Twitter projection I made, I said last week that Appalachian State would still be in one score of Miami, and Miami could only beat them by 2 points. I watched the game. I was hugely disappointed. I expected far more from Miami. I think, like you say, that if they can establish a ground game, that what's his name? But I can't remember the safety, isn't it? Bubba Bolden. He's going to be key to Miami winning, like I say, because he's going to have to come into that line of scrimmage, and he is going to have to play up in the box because they're going to have to stop at least one of the two running backs. It's going to open up a passing game. I like Michigan State's chances this week. I think they could take a huge scalp because De'Aaron King, like I say, is only rocking at like 60-ish% pass possession, like I say. Couldn't even get a receiver over 75 yards. So, like I say, he was very dink and dunk, like say, for his 200 yards. It would not surprise me at all if Michigan State can get it done. And I think that could be a very statement win this year on their potential calendar. So I think that's going to be a fun game to watch.
Oh God, it would be huge, I reckon. I mean, if they can go there and pull off that win, I mean, let's say Michigan, their schedule ain't anywhere near as good. You put Michigan State firmly in front as the better team at the minute. If they can go there and pull that off, and I'm rooting for them as well. I think I've enjoyed the way they've played. Like I say, they've really imposed that run game on teams, and hopefully they can do the same. And hopefully De'Aaron King chooses not to have a wonderful day against them this time. It would be great to see the upset. I think the one for me that I'm looking forward to the most in terms of a tactical battle has got to be Auburn at Penn State. Auburn ranked 22nd, Penn State ranked 10th. But here, this is obviously Auburn's fearsome ground attack. Tank Bigsby is the guy there, one of the best running backs this year. They've got a fearsome running attack, and they're coming up against Penn State's run defense, which is also really good. They've already nullified some good running attacks this year. Who's going to win out of that? And if Auburn can't get that ground game going, can Bo Nix take that team on his shoulders and help them win? I think tactically, this one for me is going to be fascinating, right?
Yeah, this is a clash of styles. Like I say, this is where the unmovable objects meets the force. Like I say, can Tank Bigsby be bottled up, or will, like I say, just be too much for them? The other answer is no. Bo Nix, he can very rarely ever put a game on his shoulders and win. I just don't trust him. I think he's very overrated. Like I say, he managed to look good in the first few games, like when he scored 60 points, but they were playing minnows. I don't trust him to win a game on his own without that team. I like Penn State. I think Penn State should be able to see this one out. Like I say, I think it's going to be low scoring. I don't think many points are going to be put up. Sean Clifford's played pretty well so far, but he hasn't lit up anything. He hasn't torched anyone yet. They're relying heavily, let's say, on maybe a top 10 defense in the nation. I think they can stop. I don't think they'll stop Bigsby, but I think they can limit what damage you can do. If they can force Bo Nix to take shots downfield, then Penn State should be able to win this game because I think they will catch him out and he'll make errors. Penn State are a real big player in the Big Ten, and this is their first reasonably tough game on that resume.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a low scorer. I mean, Penn State sort of ruined the first weekend for me. There were so many wonderful high-scoring close games, and then there was that game against Wisconsin, which, in fairness, they played well. But my God, there were no points till about just before the half when someone got a field goal. It was really tight, really bottling. But Wisconsin have a decent running attack, and the Nittany Lions, they nullified it and they won by any means necessary. So I'm probably expecting to see something a little similar there. The last one for me, anyhow, that I've got circled here, maybe one that's not on a lot of radars, but Fresno State at UCLA. Now, obviously, UCLA have been one of the darlings to start this season. With Charbonnet there, having a great start to the year. They've had a really impressive start, but Fresno State haven't done that bad either. They've destroyed UConn and Cal Poly the first and third games, and they managed to hang with Oregon. They lost by just one score to them. they're a potentially big banana skin here. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see if UCLA trip on this banana skin or are able to dispatch them and prove that they are for real this year. I think this has the potential for upset, but if UCLA win it, then another big player in the Pac-12 there, right?
Yeah, like you say, Jake Henney, the Fresno State quarterback, he's been slinging it. Like you say, he has been very efficient. He's opened up even in a loss, and he's managed to build up a connection with his receivers very quickly. This, like I said, this is a banana skin. If UCLA take them too lightly, then they could get taken to the cleaners. Like, they're gonna have to be focused. They're gonna have to do what they've gone do, go through the motions, establish the offensive line, get Zach Charbonnet ticking, because everything goes through him. Every game they win this season is going to have to go through him, because I don't believe Dorian Thompson-Robinson has the arm. He can't win games on his own. He's a shorter guy. He's mobile. He likes to throw on the run, but that only gets opened up when defenses respect the run. Like I say, Fresno State can frustrate Charbonnet. If they can be the first team to stop him, then they're going to have a chance to win this game and prove that Oregon game wasn't a fluke.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, but I like UCLA. I want them to continue on this roll for as long as possible. What other games are you focusing on this week? Is there anything that's caught your eye? Anything big riding or just potential upsets there? Because you and your upsets, you've been pretty decent with this year so far.
Yeah, I've managed to get, like I say, I've called a few upsets so far. There's a few games, like I say, this seems to be the year of FCS. Like, they're just doing really well, and they're stepping up when it needs to be. Like I say, there's Buffalo, Coastal. I think Virginia Tech, they've got a task on their hands. Like, West Virginia are no mugs. Like I say, if they're going to prove to me that they're the second best team in the ACC, I want to see it. Notre Dame, they have not been able to put anyone this year away, and now they get one of the receivers I highlighted this year, David Bell, against Purdue. He's going to put big numbers. Like, Kyle Hamilton is going to have to help over the top to stop him. I can see an upset there. I can see Notre Dame losing this weekend. That's my hot take. There's some other games, like say UNC. They've got Virginia. They struggle with Virginia Tech. Are they going to struggle with Virginia too? So they need to prove to me that they actually learned some lessons and they can do it against the FBS boys.
Absolutely. I agree with Purdue. I think there's a thing there. I know they put a beating down on UConn at the weekend. I know it's not the biggest thing, but they're 80 points down over the last two games they've put up. So that is a high-powered offense, and Notre Dame aren't going to like that. I think the only thing that saved them in their last game was the fact that, they weren't against the biggest offense in the world or the best timekeepers. So they could be in real danger there. Purdue do look a decent outfit this year. So there's a lot of games to look forward to, isn't there? I'm looking forward to this weekend. A lot of good games. Hopefully, it's going to mirror the first two weekends we've had so far.
Yeah, no, like I say, it's interesting. Like I said, now the rankings are changing. There's teams in the top 25 that don't deserve to be there. Like Miami, no way should they be ranked. Like I say, there's teams that could argue that they should possibly be ranked. Like I say, there's like TCU. So this is where we're going to see now teams prove people right, prove the AP, the Associate Athletic Poll. Like say that they do warrant these points. They do deserve to be in the top 25, not just because of who they are. And this is when you get the upsets. I've counted, I think, 5 FCS teams now that have beaten FBS teams that just couldn't handle it. I can see maybe 1 or 2 more this weekend. Like say, it's going to be one of them. This is going to be a historic year, I think, for FBS teams losing games of shunt FCS. The gap's not growing smaller, but they're just taking them too lightly. And like say, you do that. Like say, you play with feathers, you get your ass tickled. And we've seen a few of them already this year.
Exactly. Take them seriously or risk a lot worse if you don't, because you lose a lot more than, you lose a lot more if you get upset the these teams than just blowing them out every week. So yeah, going to be interesting to see what goes on there. So that's next week. So, you know, those games are on. We'll probably be talking about a lot of those fixtures as well. We're just going to finish off this week. Obviously, we started off with the news that another head coach has gone. That's 2 in the first 3 weeks, which does seem quite a lot, given that it's so early in the season. Ryan has had a little look around about other head coaches who might, you know, be very close to the chop, because at this point, anything goes. If people have already gone, there might be a lot more about to follow. So what did you find here, Ryan? Who are the head coaches who people need to be watching out for, whose answers are going to be a little bit warm at the moment and possibly boiling over the weekend if results don't go their way?
Right, so yeah, have a look. Like say, for what I've looked at this year, like 1920 and 2021. So like last 2.5 years, like say, to see who has come into this year, like say, who's already like slowly simmering away, who's going to get turned up to the boil. We'll start with USC. Like say, Clay Helton's gone. Like say, I've seen some names linked. Like say, Urban Meyer's ruled himself out. I'm pretty sure that one of the front runners is James Franklin from Penn State, who, that would be a weird hire. It would be purely money, because he's about 60 and 25 in his Penn State career. Why would he give all that up? Like say, unless he wants a payday. If I'm them, I'm going to wait till end of the year, because when Cincinnati loses place to the quarterback at the draft, I think it's Luke Farrell or Luke Fackrell. I think their head coach will move on, and he's a young man. He could be a great hire for USC. So if you're USC watching this, just sit tight. Don't rush to an appointment. Now, the guys that are struggling this year, they're already in the hot seat. I'm going to start with Mike Norvell, Florida State. That Jacksonville State loss did not help. That has already thrown his tenure into doubt for me. He reportedly earns between $3.5 and $4 million a year. He is one of the most expensive hires in college football, and he has already got a 3-8 record. So he's below 50%. The fans are losing patience. I think we know how harsh it is in Tallahassee. Like, coaches just don't last there. I think he's going to be someone that will be lucky if he survives this year. They don't mess around, like say down in Tallahassee. I think he could be gone before the end of the year if they have some more notable losses. But at the end of the year, when they review his play and the salary is on, he could be looking for new work already, and he's barely doubled game digits into his career. So he's someone to watch, I think, because that very much hurt. Another loss, like I said, this might surprise a few people, but Washington Huskies head coach Jimmy Lake, like teams, a lot of people I saw on YouTube, I was watching videos, they had Washington as a dark horse to win the Pac-12 before this year started. Like I say, they have that 4-star quarterback in, I think it's Dylan Morris. He won the job last year, like he was going to expect it to kick on. Two awful losses. Like I say, they got upset by Montana, that FCS, and I thought he would get them motivated to bounce back against Michigan. Nothing of the sort happened. Like I say, and they've now got what could be a very difficult year for him. I'd be surprised if they do, but if he has a really bad year and he can't get these boys motivated, I think it's going to be a very short stay in Washington for him, and they could very well move on the end of next year. But that, it would be harsh, but he's already got fans calling for his head, I feel. We're now going to move over to, like I said, we're going to stay in the Pac-12. The Arizona Wildcats, they are probably one of the least liked teams right now. They are struggling. Jed Fish, he was hired this year, so this is his first year, but he's 0-2, and in the last 2 years they've gone 4-8 and 0-5. So this is a program that is really falling on hard times. Like, he is going to pay the prices for like what they've struggled in the last few years, because I think they're going to be in win now mode. They have got to turn this round. 4-13 before this year, already 0-2. They were embarrassed because my Sun Devils, we put 70 points on them last year in the rivalry game. He is someone that if he doesn't get his first win very soon, they're going to decide and just rule this guy out. And I feel sorry for him. It was not a job I would have taken to start with. They're now going to move conference. Now, I've seen some very flashy South Florida Bulls uniforms for the game this weekend with some nice chrome helmets. You can look good as you want. You can't polish a turd. They're one of the lesser teams in the FBS. Jeff Scott, he is now 1-8. He's, like I say, he's opened up with just one win in his tenure so far. They just shipped nearly 50 points to their big rival, Florida. They've got a game this week against an FCS opponent. If they lose that game, he is going to be boiling. He is going to be in a pan that's going to be nearing 100 degrees, because they should win this week against a very lesser rival. But there's someone that I think are really struggling. Like I say, they've not done well in the last 2 years. One of them had just a winning record, but they can't establish quarterback play. I've watched them this year. They just look really bad. And that's another one that is going to be getting the chop sooner rather than later. And I've saved the best or worst for last. I'll let fans choose this. The Bowling Green Falcons. Unfortunately, for the last 3 years, they have been one of the worst teams in the FBS. Scott Loeffler is 3 years combined, and he is 3-16. He is averaging 1 win a year. And like I say, a team that is already lost both games this year. They just sliding down that. I think they're in the Mid-American, and they're just, I don't know how well you can say, when do you get rid of a guy that he's now 20 years into his resume, 20 games in, he's only got 3 wins. He's been blown out too many times. This Mount, unfortunately, I'd say this team will not put up with him through a year. He is going to be gone before the season's end, unfortunately. And they're just going to draft another guy in. And like I say, it's not even the head coach, it's the team. Right? They're just a bad team. They're scraping the barrel of the FBS. And whoever takes the next hire, well, I hope they're going to get paid a lot, because they're not going to be around much longer or very quickly. But no, these are teams that are all really, they are very much on the stove right now. And these are coaches that won't all see out the season if they're lucky.
Yeah, I mean, the Bowling Green one, he's screwed, because I think in their next 3 games, they've got Minnesota and Kent State in there, both of whom are really good sides, and are probably going to put a whooping on them as well. I do agree with the Washington one as well, actually. I know it's quite early there, but as we saw with USC, when you see Oregon taking down Ohio State, you see UCLA taking down LSU, you see teams putting big scalps out there, and your own programs can't even win a game against teams who are nothing compared to these big dogs. You put under pressure real quick. You're like, well, why can't you replicate that success as well? They're scalping big teams. You can't beat small ones. It wouldn't surprise me if the Washington job was injected, because I know that Montana one, he got so much bad press over that, didn't they? It's been labeled the worst result in the franchise's history, and you never want that one on your record. So, yeah, I agree with most of those there. I think we're going to see a lot more. We're going to see a lot more of these firings going forward. So, we wait to see. Is there anything else you want to get in this week, or feel we've been through quite a lot? So, are there any finishing notes you've got for this one at all?
No, I just think it was like I said, this weekend wasn't about who delivered. It was like I say, it was like who disappointed. This was like I say, just a team of lulls. Like I say, Miami barely got the job done. Florida State got embarrassed. Ohio State's credentials took a hit. Like some teams this week will just be wanting to forget it happened very quickly and need to bounce back.
Yeah, and we're probably going to see a few of those this week if I had to guess about it. But like you say, this time next week, we could be some real dark horses emerging here. I mean, there's already a few out there, especially teams we like as well. If the UCLA's carry on, if Liberty carry on doing as well as they are, Coastal Carolina, some really good teams, and hopefully, they carry on with their great seasons, because they've got some really good players in there. But we wait to see. So that's everything for this week. See, a lot gone through in this episode. So yeah, that's been really good. In terms of next episodes that we've got coming up, so our main podcast, ROTL UK, we'll be on again tomorrow night. We're going to be previewing the game against the Green Bay Packers. And I don't know about you, Ryan, but I don't know which one to think of this. I don't know whether to think, are they vulnerable and could we win this? Or are they just going to lay down an absolute ass whooping on us and as penance for that first game? It's going to be interesting, isn't it?
Well, like I say, once you're backed into a corner, you either attack or you roll over, have your belly tickled. And right now they're in a corner. So let's see which one we see.
Absolutely. I still don't know what I'm going to predict for it yet, but if I go where I figure I'm going to go, then a lot of long-time listeners are going to be absolutely shocked with me because I'm usually a bastion of positivity on these things. But we will leave that for tomorrow. So yeah, that's the next podcast for the main Roar of the Lions, Detroit Lions podcast. Obviously for ourselves, we'll be back in a week on the 23rd of September, the Wednesday. We will be reviewing week 3. We'll be taking a little look at week 4, and I can tell you now, Rye, just first up, I put a little call for ideas and stuff out just before the podcast. And I know I've had a few requests come in, but given how long we've gone today, I'm going to move them back to next week. So we've been asked about Kyle Hamilton, obviously the safety at Notre Dame. So we're going to need to have a little chat about him next week, and maybe safeties in general, because our secondary looked pretty bad in the week just gone. And we've also had a request from Ash asking us who are the top prospects in the draft who the Lions should avoid. So I think we might do a segment on that. We'll need to go away and have a little look about some of these bigger players who maybe aren't going to fit us and who the Lions need to stay away from. So that's going to be quite an interesting topic to go through. So we'll have all that in next week's college podcast. Is there anything else in terms of the podcast or anything you want to mention just before we go?
Nope. I can think of players we should avoid already, so that won't be hard next week.
Is it if we're using code, is one of them Sleeden Covis?
Yeah, he's one of them for sure.
Yeah. We're using code. You don't know who he is, but we'll reveal him next week to you. Yeah, no. So thanks for your suggestions. As I say, we always want you to get in touch with us. You know, if there's players you want us to watch, positional groups, games, etc., just get in touch. We'll do the scouting for you. As you can see with Ryan so far, he's been incredibly successful in what he's been doing. And as I say, I need to really up my game. So I'm really going to be having a look at some of these requests this week. Just reminds me to go through our socials. So, you know, you can find us on all platforms. On YouTube, you'll find us at Roar of the Lions UK. Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram. You'll find us at Roar of the Lions _UK. And just to put a shout out to you guys on there, Twitter is going absolutely mental at the moment. We're getting so much interaction on there, and can't thank you enough for that. Instagram, Ryan, I know you're busy with that one, aren't you? You've just got over 100 followers on that.
Yeah, like you say, just slowly getting a bit more interactions, like you say, keeping up, like you say, just stuff like transactions, like you say, just sharing photos, stuff like that, like you say, just building that up too.
Exactly. So yeah, thanks to all of you who are looking on those. And then obviously you can find us on Facebook, our page on there, Roar of the Lions UK, or our Facebook group, Detroit Lions Fans UK, One Pride Worldwide. And obviously you can find us on the website as well, www.roarofthelionsuk.com. That's everything for this week. We will see you again in a week to discuss another hopefully enthralling weekend of college football. It has been a wonderful season so far, and hopefully that will long continue. But for now, remains me to thank Ryan for this evening, and we'll see you again soon. One Pride.
One Pride.